says you're okay. So I'm going to talk about a project that we have underway that's nearly done. And then also Ken asked me to touch on RENA a little bit. So I have a couple slides related to RENA. And I started with the presentation I made for South County and I changed it around a bit. So if you did watch the South County presentation, some of it will be the same, some of it is different. Okay. So here's what I'm going to talk about. The first three are related to the Travel Trends project, or which I think is officially titled Understanding Regional Travel Patterns. We call it Travel Trends just informally at work. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, Lauren said we see the preview, so I need to figure
it's just, I don't know if you can do the bigger slide.
Switch.
Yeah, switch screen.
Do you see the slide?
Yeah, if you can go up there and do display settings in the middle and just do full screen or something, upper left, or it's fine. If people can see it, can people see him okay?
I also dropped the slides in the chat too. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
It'll be fine.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about why we are doing the Travel Trends project, talk a little bit about how we're doing it, and then share some initial results of the project. And I will say we have a draft internally wrapped up. We're still doing a couple edits to it. And we have our advisory committee will meet the first Thursday of November. And when that agenda is docketed is when kind of the release of the full draft report comes out. And there's much, much more in it than what I'm going to share with you today. So I do encourage you to take a look at it. Yeah, and towards the end there, I have 5 or 6 slides on the RENA process and talk a little bit about how that relates to the other work that we do. Okay. So why we were doing this, not going to read the text there, but ultimately, in the last couple of years, there's been a few what we call big data platforms that have come online and offer a product that enables you to kind of look inside the crystal ball. And so we said it would be great, see if we could get a subscription to one of these programs, and then we can mine it for all it's worth. And when we do it, we're not intending to solve any problems with this project by itself. However, it presents a wide array of data that can be used to inform other planning projects that we have going on. So yeah, again, we're not trying to solve any problems or develop any plans with the project as it is. However, we fully intend to be able to draw from the results for a long time, and hopefully some of our member jurisdictions do as well. And so the big data platform that we ended up with is a company called Replica. And Replica creates this pool of data with what's called an activity-based model. And in transportation planning, we use models to forecast the future. It's kind of an imperfect way to try and guesstimate what a future condition is going to look like given certain changes in population, economy, changes in the roadway network. What's the impact of that? So that's kind of where models come in. And models, you typically calibrate to a base year. So a base year where you can compare it to existing real world conditions. So it's what SBCAG does with its model, and that's what Replica does with its. However, Replica doesn't care about the future. So they're solely focused on calibrating their model as accurately as possible to the existing condition. So Replica replicates reality. And how they do it, so they build out their model with the existing built environment being the transportation network, the buildings, where schools are, where employment centers are, everything is within this model. And then as they run it, they keep calibrating it. And where it's unique is they use mobile location data. So they buy anonymized data from cell phone companies and are able to use that to calibrate the model. And they also buy credit card data from the credit card companies, which is also anonymized, so you can see credit card swipes. So you have these two unique data points that enable a very good representation of reality. And I will say where it would lack, any error that's built into it comes from the privacy of these data sources. So the higher the level of privacy, the less accurate the results and so forth. But in terms of this product, it's probably as good as it gets, that we can, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's going to be, probably 98% accurate. So that's the platform. And I will say, as we did this, we had a variety of other things that we looked at that we thought were useful that didn't come out of Replica. And I think the first 2 or 3 slides share some of that. So we looked at employment. The table or the graph on the left is leading into the Great Recession. Where were the jobs lost or gained? The table to the right is the 10 years coming out of the Great Recession. And you can see, so focused on the north, you can see Santa Maria, from 2005 to 2020, they gained roughly 5,000 jobs. So you can see the change in jobs. The next slide is housing. And again, Santa Maria did really well. So they gained about 5,000 jobs and about 8,000 or north of 8,000 housing units, which means they are keeping up with their jobs housing imbalance. And I couldn't say that about every jurisdiction on there, but Santa Maria definitely, the development of housing keeps pace with the jobs growth, which is good. We also looked at work from home. This was of unique interest to us, and I think this will tie into the RENA discussion a little bit. So SBCAG, one of the things we are responsible to do is develop the region's regional transportation plan, which is a long-term vision document. It looks at how the region intends to invest in the transportation network over time. And in 2008, the state passed a bill called Senate Bill 375, which requires us, as part of that regional transportation process, to also include what they call a sustainable community strategy. And that shows us, or it requires us to demonstrate how the region will reduce greenhouse gas emissions from light duty vehicles in support of state goals, broader state goals. So, when the state passed AB 32 back in, I think it was 2006, the Global Warming Solutions Act, it got cut up into different pies. SB 375 is one of them, and that's our responsibility. Reduce greenhouse gases by reducing driving. So we were very interested in seeing, the lasting benefit of work from home coming out of the pandemic. So you see here, on the left, who is or the level of remote work prior to the pandemic. About 10,000 people, which is about 6% of the workforce, was working from home prior to the pandemic. In 2021 and 2022, it shot up to 25,000. Which is about 15 or 16% of the population. So from our perspective, in terms of achieving greenhouse gas reductions, that is very good news. And we hope that it has an enduring effect, that it keeps going, at least at the level that it's at. The two other graphics.
For the next slides, would you mind if I just take over to share screen? It's so tiny to see these. And I got your PowerPoint now from what you shared.
Okay, I can stop sharing right now.
Okay, and then I'll just take over. Sorry for the quick break.
No, that makes it better anyhow.
But there, can everyone see?
Yep, including me.
Okay, just tell me when to switch the slides, Mike.
Okay, will do. Yeah, then you can see on the graph or the pie chart that's in the upper, the distribution by age of who is working remotely. And then at the bottom is by income. And it is unique to see that's a very clear trend. The more money you make, the more likely you are to work from home. Next slide, please. Here, this is an interesting thing that we looked at. And this is related to how many of the jobs are filled by local labor. And so I'm just going to talk about Buellton because it's the top line. So in those first two columns, you have the percent and the number, yeah, right where Lauren's going with the cursor. So that is the work trips that originate. So that's people wake up in the city of Buellton and they're going to work. So that says only 19.6% of the population that wakes up in Buellton to go to work stays in Buellton for work. Over 80% is leaving to go work somewhere else. And then the next two columns are just the opposite. So that's jobs that are in Buellton. Who are they filled by? So 72.9% of the jobs in Buellton are filled by people who come in from the outside. Yeah, and then for Santa Maria, it's actually very close to Santa Barbara there, with 2/3 of the jobs in the city are filled by people who start their journey to work within the city, which you can take to be city residents. And that's all related then. The more you're importing or more you're exporting, the more commuting is going on. So it is good to see that the big cities, a lot of the workforce is local. Next slide. Then we looked at long distance, so trips for going to work that are longer than 16 miles and longer than 32 miles. And we did the same thing, the originating, which is on your left, and destined for, which is on the right. So again, you can see back to the left with the trips that are originating. So we know that Buellton has 80% of its workforce leaves the city for work. Of the whole population that starts their journey to work in the city of Buellton, almost half are going more than 16 miles, and better than 1/3 are traveling more than 32 miles to work. Santa Maria, the numbers are a lot lower. And this one, I wanted to point something out. If you go between these two, the North County, South County, so the second and third line from the bottom on both tables, it's interesting how the numbers kind of flip between the two charts, where in the North County, there's a larger portion, or for the 32 plus anyhow, a larger portion of the workforce has long commutes. And then in the South County, a much smaller portion of the, back to the other one, the 6.6%, the much smaller portion has long commute in the South County. So that's where the trips start. And then if you look at, on the right, the same two figures, the 9% and the 15.3, they're almost inverse of each other. And that's related to the back and forth traffic between South County and North County. Next slide, please. Okay, so then this here is similar. We're looking at the average and median distance for trips. Again, the first two columns are originating. The second two are destined for. So I think what's interesting to highlight in these is the difference between the median and the average. So the median is, the 50th percentile. And so the bigger the difference between the median and the average, it shows the polar extremes. So I think I'm going to highlight Santa Barbara for this, but if look at Santa Barbara, if you start your journey to work in the city, both the median and the average are pretty low, 8.9 and 3%. But for the trips that are continue over the next two columns that are going to Santa Barbara for work, your median is really short, 3.8 miles. So that means you have a massive part of the workforce has very short commutes. But the average is shot up to 13.1, which means there's a lot of people drive a long way to go to work in Santa Barbara. And I was just using that as an example. The tighter they are, you can see Carpinteria is pretty tight. Then that means that, it's probably a more equal distribution of the commute lengths, where the ones that it's far apart, it's either short or long with very little in the middle. So I think that highlights an interesting point. Next slide. Okay, so this is, so there's two slides that are, oops.
Sorry,
going.
I lost my key. Sorry.
It's all right. One more.
Oh,
One more.
damn, I keep on pressing the up button and it's not working. There we go. Here?
One more.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, so here we did this for every city, the unincorporated areas, such as we did it for Orchid, we did it for where else? We have numbers for San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria Valley, Lompoc Valley, but there. So we were looking at. So this is people who wake up in the North County, anywhere in the North County, and they're going to work. Where are they going? How are they getting there, and how far are they driving? So you could see in the table on the left where they are going. And so this includes, like, say, the city of Santa Maria is the first one. 43.4% of everybody who wakes up in the North County goes to work in the city of Santa Maria. But that also includes the people who live and work in the city of Santa Maria. So you can kind of see the distribution of jobs. If you go down to the bottom three lines of that same table, you could see that 9.4% of the North County workforce comes down south for work. 82% of it stays within the North County, and 7.5% goes to SLO County for work. And then you could see the primary mode of travel, how they're going around. Private auto, you can say that's driving by yourself alone. Auto passenger is in a carpool, walk, bike, or transit. I want to qualify that the replica platform, for as good as it is and for all the value that it brought us, it does not do transit for small agencies well. So it does SMART, to the Santa Maria Regional Transit. It picks that up well, but it does not pick up, say, Guadalupe Transit or Colt or San Ynez Valley Transit. So the North County Transit was kind of the one sacrificial lamb for with the replica platform. And then you could see how far people were driving and how long. So this is the people who start their commute in the North County, where they're going, how far they're driving, and how they're getting there. And if you go to the next slide, Lauren, this is just the opposite. So this is, they're ending their journey to work in the North County. So where did they start? You can see the vast majority of North County's workforce comes from the city of Santa Maria, which would be expected as the largest city and the largest city by far in the North County. But also, if you go back down to the bottom three rows, you could see that there is a contingent of South County that comes up to work in the North County. About 3.8% of the jobs are filled by South County. 86.5% filled by North County residents. And then about 8.2% of the jobs are filled by residents of SLO County. Again, you have how they're getting there and how far they're driving to get there. And I will say, it doesn't matter if they're driving. If they're on a bus, the trip is going to be the same. So this is the distance, no matter how they're actually making that trip.
So for example, if we look here with San Luis Obispo, so there's like we're exporting basically 8
That's importing labor.
Oh, that's importing.
Yeah, you're importing labor. Yeah. And if you take
this is the export originating in. So going to San Luis Obispo, there's 7.5%, and then coming in is 8.2%.
Yeah. And if you want the number, you just multiply that percent by the number that's in the slide title there, the end value.
Is this one, the 130, 103.
And the 2022 or the 2022 is just the year of the data. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So I thought this one I threw it in. I thought it may be of interest to you. So this is, it only has one way for this one. It's people going to Vandenberg Space Force Base and where they're coming from. And so there's a workforce of roughly 2,800 people commuting to jobs on Vandenberg. About a quarter of them come out of the city of Lompoc. You see 20% out of the city of Santa Maria. Only less than 5%, is 4.9%, is people who live and work on Vandenberg, which would probably be the junior enlisted or the people who are in the staff, I guess they call it staff housing or base housing. You could also see, it's interesting too, 6.8% of the workforce comes up from southern Santa Barbara County, and almost 10% comes down from SLO County. Next slide, Lauren. So this is the one question I always wanted to get answered, and I never had a way until we got Replica. So this is, if you're going from Santa Maria to Santa Barbara, how do you get there? Is it south of Los Alamos? You're given a choice. Do you take the 154? Do you take the 101? So we wanted to answer that question, and Replica enables us to do so. So in the southbound direction from A to B on the map, said 48% of the traffic that's on the 101 going south at the A also passes the B on the 101 down in Santa Barbara. And you can see more than half, 62%, choose to use the 154, and a much smaller percent of 38 use the 101. And then going north, it's a bit different. Number one, there's a lot more local traffic on the highway in the south. So it's only 14% of the traffic that passes B also passes A. It's still a majority, but it's a little slimmer majority of 54% choose the 154 over the 101. We don't know why that is. There was a question, why is that it's a higher share coming south and north? I can't answer it, I don't know.
Mike, could I ask a question on that slide?
Sure.
I'm just curious, 48% that are passing A also pass B. And so that's people that either take 101 or 154.
Yes.
So less than half the people that are passing A get to B. So more than half the people are going to what, Cachuma or Gaviota?
Or they could be going to anywhere in the San Ynez Valley. They could be going to Buellton. They could be going to Goleta. Even if they come down to 101, they're never going to get to B.
Got it. Yeah, Goleta is the answer, the big answer probably to that question. Thank you.
Yeah. The next slide, Lauren. Okay, so this, when I kept this slide in here from the last one, but I want to change the focus here and talk about the right two columns, the SLO. So we're just trying to figure why people come from San Luis Obispo or Ventura counties. And this is taken at, for the north, it's taken at the Santa Maria River Bridge. So it's 101 traffic and not 1 traffic. Why are they coming in? And it's interesting that for a weekday, the #1 reason that people come in is work, but that is by no means the majority. That's only less than a third of the traffic that's coming from SLO residents into Santa Barbara County. Only less than a third are actually coming for work. And then the weekend, it's much lower, as you expect. On the right, we did work and school. And so this was looking at trends. So you focus on the north here, which would be north. So we have the fall 2019, 2021, and 2022, the values of, what was the pandemic's impact on people coming for work or school from San Luis Obispo County. And you could see that from 2019 to 2022, the traffic coming across the Santa Maria River Bridge for the purpose of going to work has actually decreased by almost 10%. But for people coming in to go to school, it increased by about 10%. And overall, the traffic on the bridge related to these two uses has increased by 2.5%. Next slide, please. So this is just the vehicle miles traveled per capita. So you take the total amount of miles that everybody has driven in a particular jurisdiction or region and divide it by the population. So you can see what's the mileage assigned for each person. I will qualify that for this, we look at the vehicle miles traveled of 2022 and 2019, yet we use 2020 population for both. So there's a small degree of error built into it. And I think the one thing that's interesting, if you look at North County, there's been, Lauren, you have the cursor, third row up, North County, there's 17.5 miles attributable to each person in North County in 2022. And that's a decrease from 19.9 in 2019. So that's the impact of the pandemic, which is a decrease of about 12%. And in the region overall, the amount of driving happening on our roads is decreased by about 9% coming out of the pandemic, which is a good thing, especially for our planning work to be able to show that we can meet greenhouse gas reductions. Next slide, please. I think this is probably it before we switch to RENA, but this was something that I did and it was interesting. I was curious of what are the way that people go or move around. So the table on the left is for any reason, they're going anywhere, and on the right, they're only going to work or school. But dividing that up by whether they're living in a single family residence, a detached house, or if they're in a multifamily development. And the result is I think pretty much across the board, if you live in a multifamily development, you actually, I think I'm proving myself wrong there because it's actually higher for drive alone in the North County. But typically the percentages are higher. The multifamily developments produce more sustainable travel. More walking, more biking, more transit coming out of the multifamily. And this was another one like the 154 where we don't know why, but this one we can suspect that it may be related to just the fact of the locations where the multifamily developments are going to be located closer to town, probably in more walkable and bikeable areas. But yeah, so it's more sustainable for multifamily developments. Next slide.
But there is a difference between South County here and North County here for drive alone and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to move into RENA. I'm going to give you the 5-minute version. And this is, Ken asked me to do this, but as I mentioned, SBCAG is responsible to develop a sustainable community strategy, which shows how we will reduce greenhouse gas emissions from light duty vehicles. Light duty vehicles are anything that you or I drive. It's just, we're not looking at dump trucks or tractor trailers. We're looking at cars and pickups and SUVs. And I've always said that RENA happens in 3 phases, with SBCAG involved in 2 of those phases. The first phase is the determination, and that is working with the State's Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. We determine what is the region's need of housing, of an 8-year need, how much is coming to the region. And I will say that the formula is very well defined in law, so there's not a whole lot of flexibility with it. In this phase, we're just making sure that we're using the right data and capturing everything. The second phase is SBCAG works with its partner agencies to develop a regional allocation formula. So that we take the number that came from the first step and divvy it up amongst the jurisdictions in Santa Barbara County. And then the third phase is what's going on now, is all the jurisdictions take that number and they update their housing elements to accommodate it. And how this relates to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So SBCAG, it's through land use development patterns and transportation investment that we can demonstrate how we reduce greenhouse gases. And in our region, we have a lot of long distance commuting. So ultimately it's closing the jobs housing imbalance is the way that we achieve that. And RENA is a tool for that. So ultimately we had to make sure, and it's our board that approves it and HCD that agrees, but we had to show that we wanted RENA, the result of the RENA process, to support our other planning of closing the jobs housing imbalance. So next slide, Malone. RENA has 5 objectives. I'm not going to read them, but the 5 objectives, basically when we develop our methodology to allocate to the local agencies, we have to demonstrate to the state how we are satisfying each of these. And then we're not involved, but when the housing elements get updated, they also have to demonstrate how they are meeting each of these. The next slide. In the RENA cycle that we finished and that the housing elements are being worked on for now is the 6th cycle. It was a bit different than any cycle prior, and that was related to, there was a bill that was passed in 2018, Senate Bill 828, which was a Scott Wiener bill. and it changed the way that the state calculates housing need. It changed the vacancy rate from, I believe it was 2% to 5%. And it added these two new factors, overcrowding and cost burden. So the more overcrowding you have, the bigger your number is going to be. And the same for cost burden, being households spending more than 30% of their household income on rent or housing costs. So the more cost burden you are, the bigger your number is going to be. And that was the reason that we went from 11,000 housing units in the 5th cycle to 25,000 housing units in the 6th cycle. It was related to these factors that they describe the changes. And you'll see, I think it's the next slide, Lauren. Yeah, so this actually, it comes from, this is the result of the process that came from the HCD, and it shows this is the methodology that's used to calculate your housing need. So they take the population at the end of the housing element cycle, so that's the county's forecasted population, take away the group quartered population, which are people living in things such as military barracks, college dorms, jails, people who don't require your typical housing. So then that leaves the number of people who need to be housed. And then the state uses the household formation rates and to determine the number of households that means. So we have 460,000 people need housed, and the state believes that that is accommodating 160,850 housing units. And then you see some of those adjustments related to that I just spoke of that came out of Senate Bill 828. We're adding, because we have a low vacancy rate, they're going to add 4,000 units. Because we have a overcrowding problem, they add 10,000 units. The replacement is related to housing that is lost for one reason or another. It could be demolished, condemned, it can fires, any reason that a house is lost, it gets added because we have to add it back in. Subtract out the number of existing housing units, add that last adjustment factor for cost burden, and then you land at the region-wide number of almost just shy of 25,000. Next slide, please. So then this is kind of the second step. So we got the number, and then we work with our local agencies, also reflecting that we have to satisfy those 5 objectives of RHNA, and we develop a methodology. So the methodology—
So that number, just to remind people, is that 25,000
yeah.
number is up here, is that regional determination?
Yes. Yeah, so our methodology was, we're going to split north and south first. And we did that by jobs. So it was related to the existing jobs and the forecasted future jobs, though the forecasted future and existing kind of trended pretty much the same. So you could have picked either of those and ended up with a very similar result. So that was jobs. So we ended up, the result of that was 60% of the regional number came to South County, 40% came to North County. And then because cost burden and overcrowding were such a big part of why the number got so big, the second step was based purely off those. It was, so the more cost burden you were, or the more overcrowded you are, the bigger your RHNA number is going to be. So we took the North County pot, and we developed a factor related to cost burden and overcrowding for each of the jurisdictions, and then allocated accordingly. And we did the same for the South Coast. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is it probably doesn't mean much unless I talk about it. So one of the things that we have to do, and it's related to one of the objectives of RHNA, is we have to balance out the income groups. So the RHNA, the state provides us with our RHNA allocation in 4 different income groups. Above moderate, which is 120% plus of the region's adjusted gross income or household income. Moderate is 80 to 120% of the area's median income. Low is, I believe it was 50 to 80%, and very low is 50% or lower of the region's area median income. on the far left, you could see in the bigger bands, like the above moderate, it's 43.2, moderate 17.7. So that's how our allocation came. So 43.2% of the allocation was in the above moderate category. And this is reflective of the existing condition at the time in Santa Barbara County. So they use Census and Department of Finance data to determine what the breakdown is. They determine 43.2% of your households are above moderate income. So therefore, 43.2% of your allocation is above moderate. However, they require us to try and balance it across the region. And that's to avoid concentrating wealth or poverty. And I want to focus on Guadalupe, which is in the middle. So you can see, so the averages are the bands that are behind, and you can see what the allocation ends up being. So Guadalupe bears a burden of housing, undue share of the region, say very low and low income populations. So we give them a very small percentage of very low and low in an attempt to balance it out.
So that's that 3.7% of their allocation needs to be very low.
Yes, but conversely, you can see 73% is above moderate. And that's attempt to balance the city out over time. So the closer you are to, say, the averages, and I think if you look at, say, Santa Barbara is, fairly close to the averages in terms of its allocation compared to Guadalupe, and even Santa Maria also is pretty far off. So that's because the shares have gotten out of alignment over time. So RENA's an attempt to try and balance it back out. And for this, we turned the screws as hard as we could. But if we had turned them any further, we would have started getting negative allocations, which we couldn't do. So it's trying to fix the issue as much as possible without getting into the negative allocation territory.
Before you move on from the slide,
Yeah.
can I ask a question? And it kind of relates to the Santa Maria general plan item coming up. So what's the impact of having Guadalupe for one and Santa Maria for the other to have a relatively high level of above moderate? What's the pressure? What kind of pressure does that put on these cities to annex the land around them, which is almost all prime farmland?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not involved enough in their discussions of their housing element to know what's going on. And I think, when we do this, we don't consider annexations. We're not saying that, and ultimately, even if they did annex, any housing that's built probably comes off the county's number, because it was assigned to the county to begin with. But the above moderate can be considered really the only thing that's a developer can build without some level of government support. That they could build it and they could sell it, and so above moderate, it's 120% of the area median income or higher. And when we did this, I believe the cutoff when we went through RENA, which was probably 2019, 2020, was, I believe it was $96,000 per household. So it's housing for households $96,000 or up, which, it could go to the moon, but it's the bottom end of it is 96,000, which still is not particularly high for affording a lot of housing.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I'm not going to get into the annexation. Next slide. So this was the end result. This table came out of the RENA report. I'm sorry, it doesn't look that pretty, but these are the numbers that were assigned to the individual jurisdictions. And you can see, like for Guadalupe, 431 total units, only 3 of them in that very low. And that's where we had turned the screw as hard as we could. And if we turned it further, that number went negative.
So to go back to this, just to repeat, so we're at 3.7% of their allocations very low. So that's their allocation. This was three houses is 3.7%. 3 units, sorry.
Yeah, 3 units. The and then you can see the above moderate too, which actually that probably aligns fairly well with Guadalupe with the Pescadero development. Pam? You're muted.
You're on mute, sorry.
Thank you. It's a lot to absorb. I spend quite a bit of time in Guadalupe, but this would apply to all of the areas. So am I understanding that the numbers on the previous slide, you're trying to create a rebalance?
Yes.
Okay. So how aren't you changing, say for Guadalupe, if all of a sudden it becomes above moderate in the majority, you've totally changed the city of Guadalupe.
Yeah, it's not me. It's
Well, no, it's not you. Okay. They are changing.
seek the
I
balance.
mean, they're just drastically.
Number 4 there. Seek the
It's
balance
the-
income strata.
Seek the balance of income strata, but also fair housing laws.
Yeah. Because the thing now is if you don't do this, you end up concentrating poverty or wealth. So the attempt of this is to not concentrate poverty or wealth. Yeah, and
Yes, I get that. I just don't see how it's gonna magically
You're
happen.
talking
But
about like gentrification and
I'm talking, yes, gentrification. And how are people who live there now suddenly going to be able to afford? And I don't want to take us off track,
yeah,
but to look at this without also considering where these jobs are going to come from and how much they're going to pay, doesn't give us the full picture. But I do want to say the information is very helpful,
mhm.
and I'm learning a lot. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's just sort of isolated.
I
yeah,
do want to
yeah.
I like
Um,
to say
Jamie?
something.
Janine,
Jeannie?
yeah,
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I see your point, Pam, and that's interesting because you think of people who are in Guadalupe who are not housed or can't afford it. But I think the idea is to spread it out so that there's other options. They don't have to live in a poorer area. So
Mhm.
if you can get more of the very low income housing in Orchid, you can help to balance it out. So people have an option to live in Orchid who don't have an option there now. And I'm looking at that, and Orchid needs to have a lot more of that. They need to have a lot more of the low and moderate housing. So I think I think it's a good idea to balance this out so you can have a choice of where you live.
Yeah,
those
actually,
are like, that's the state, the state objectives. It's not our objectives. Like these are the
Right.
states. And then, when the state goes back and forth with jurisdictions on their housing elements, they also run it again. Like they had to approve our methodology and allocation against these objectives, but plus the housing elements are reviewed against these objectives.
yeah. And Lauren, if you could stop sharing for a second, I want to share
Yeah.
one thing real quick that just illustrates this. Just it's a table. Here we go. So can you see 2 tables? So the upper table here, this is the income, this is the existing income distribution before RENA. And you can see the reds and oranges are variations from the mean. So for instance, we know that the above moderate
Zoom
was,
a little bit in, sorry.
yeah, the above.
I think lower right is the Zoom buttons.
Oh, thank you.
So we know that above moderate's 43.2% of all households in the region. So this here shows how far off the existing housing inventory is from 43.2%. So you can see Goleta is 10.2% above 43.2. And then I guess just picking on Goleta again, for very low, they have, I forget what the number was, say 23%, it's 7.3% below that. So this is what we looked at when we went in, and this is what we tried to correct for. So then if you consider the RENA allocations, this is what it looks like. So if you take the existing housing and then add in the RENA allocations, it seeks to provide more balance. And you go from, if just looking at the colors, I'm going to zoom out so you could see both. Lots of reds and oranges on the upper, not quite as bad on the lower. And it's just, the problem was too much to solve in one RENA cycle.
So the bottom, sorry, Mike, to clarify, the bottom is for after
RENA, yes. Yeah, so before RENA, after RENA, and we were able to bring it much closer to everybody being somewhat equal, but we couldn't get there in one RENA cycle. So
Guadalupe then still has a significant variation from the mean even after RENA on the low income.
You would have had to take away housing units, which you can't do.
On the very low.
Yeah. And I'm going to put a link in it's going to take me a second to get it, but I'm going to put a link in the chat of the RENA plan, which has the graphic that I just showed. But anyhow, that ends all I had planned. I'm happy to take questions.
Oh yeah, that does. There's no more.
Yeah, go ahead, Cliff. You go first. I got some too.
You're muted, Cliff. You're on mute, Cliff.
He's looking for it.
There we go.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, there we go. One comment back on the previous presentation, and I don't know how this affects things, but there is another way to get from Santa Barbara to Santa Maria. It's actually I live in Orchid, so there is 135, and I was actually, since I had to go down to Santa Barbara on Monday, I was looking at the how much longer it would take, and it only takes about 4 minutes if I were to take 135 to Lompoc and then go up to Orchid. So just a comment about that.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing, and again, I know you aren't providing solutions, but I do have to make a comment, and this is something that's come up with in SBCAN. So there is discussion of having a huge development in the Solomon Hills, which is the south part of Orchid, and there has been some real interest from some businesses in Santa Barbara to develop to be able to get people to come from Santa Maria down to Santa Barbara. And when I saw these numbers, I did attend your previous presentation. It did not seem to say much about what we have seen, like with the Solomon Hills development, which they're talking about building, getting to like 5,000 people to live there. They're saying that well, they aren't going to commute. They're just going to work there in the Solomon Hills. I don't believe that. I believe that there is pressure to get people on the road down to Santa Barbara. So I just wanted to throw that as something that I am concerned about.
Yeah, I've been following that also.
And I guess also just real quickly, just another comment. It is interesting. There are various nonprofit organizations like Planned Parenthood and the Democratic Club. There are a lot of activities that happen in Santa Barbara. And in the past, Santa Maria has been sort of left out of that. There is a starting development of hiring buses, getting us down to like Buellton, and then take a bus from Buellton into Santa Barbara. I find that to be an exciting development, because that then makes it easier for us. You know, it's like every once in a while I have to drive down to Santa Barbara to go to meetings. So anyway, that's something that's happening, and I'm really happy to see that happening. So
I also encourage you, we do an unmet transit needs process pretty much every year. We do a survey, and so we'll be kind to make sure that you're on the distribution list for that. If there's any needs that you have that are not being met for transportation, to document that and participate in the survey, because that's shared with our transit partners. There's limited resources for transit agencies, so I can appreciate and understand of going private, but yeah, it's really great to have participation in that unmet transit needs.
And quite honestly, Lauren, one of the dilemmas that I have is, you know, like with Planned Parenthood, there's a lot of stuff happening in Ventura, and it's fine for me to get down to Santa Barbara, like where Planned Parenthood is, but you know, there is that sign right before I turn off on, I think it's Garden Street. There's a sign that says "Traffic stopped ahead." You know, as you know. You live it. It's really difficult to get through Ventura. That, you know, it's a real nightmare, and it's going to be a nightmare for several years, as you know. So anyway, thank you.
Jeannie.
So I'd like to I put my email address in the chat. If you would send us the unmet needs survey information when it comes out the next time, we can distribute it to our list. I also wanted to mention something. Cliff just made me think of when he said that there's a watch out, be careful, you have to stop ahead, or whatever that sign was. This may be something for the city of Santa Maria, but maybe it's something for you guys. There's some exits from Highway 101 into the city of Santa Maria where you practically, sometimes you actually have to stop on the freeway because the traffic is not moving quickly enough to get you on the off ramp. And that's at Main Street, at Donovan. I think there was one other part, but those are the two that come to mind. And I think it has to do with the way that traffic flows once you get off, because everybody has to stop before they turn left. And then there's this traffic signal to turn left onto Main Street. And most people are turning left, and there's only one lane turning left. So it seems to me like if the city would just have 2 left turn lanes and would give priority to people coming off of the freeway, that they could just keep them going on that Main Street off ramp. But I don't know if anybody's even complaining about that. And
I've heard about it before, but it's state highway to state highway. So it's probably Caltrans. And not the city.
Yeah, and I don't think that's one of the Measure A intersection projects, because we have 135 and 101 interchange slated for the Measure A. But would that count, since it's Main Street, Mike? Would that count for the 166?
I was just going to mention that,
Okay.
but unfortunately, no. But I can plug that while we're at it. SBCAG received a grant in partnerships with the cities of Santa Maria and Guadalupe to do a comprehensive long-term corridor study of the 166. We're going from Highway 1 in Guadalupe to Depot Street in Santa Maria. So almost half of Main Street in Santa Maria, but ultimately to look at what are the long-term needs of this corridor to meet the needs of everybody. And I know once you get out of the city, you have a lot of conflicts with ag uses, and see if we could find some solutions to make it more harmonious for no matter who's going on the road. And also, so that project will start probably around June or July of next year, and we'll certainly engage with you, and hopefully you be involved with our planning project.
So what I was describing, putting 2 left turn lanes from the frontage road onto Main Street, that would be Caltrans because it's going onto Main Street. It wouldn't be the city.
Well, it's state highway to state highway. So that's a very good question.
You can ask for an investigation. I mean, it's gonna, they have a backlog, but you can certainly ask for an investigation of that intersection, so then it can start the process that if it comes back as an issue.
Ask Caltrans for an investigation. And the same thing with Donovan Road turning on, I mean, the off-ramp from 101 onto Donovan Road, that also be Caltrans.
Well, the Caltrans owns the ramp and the city owns Donovan, so.
So you can let the city know to, you know, I would certainly share it with the city, but if it's on the state right of way, you need to ask Caltrans to do an investigation of those intersections. But I think it would be helpful. I mean, if there's at all, you can get photos and stuff like that, or other people asking for that. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, we need to go
The-
drive down together, Ken. I'll get my camera out while you're driving.
We'll park somewhere and you'll get your drone out
Yeah.
and film it.
And it's it's like an issue too in Goleta. It's an issue. They did an investigation in Goleta too for the Stork Road off ramp, and that backs up. And
I
Okay,
think
so-
the city took the lead on the project at Better, where the northbound 101 off onto Better. I believe the city took the lead on that.
So we have 2 more agenda items that
sorry.
won't take very long, but I have a couple of questions on what you've just been talking about, Mike and Lauren. So I'm going to get those out, but don't spend too long answering them. It might be bigger questions, but anyway, you have a sustainable community strategy, and that tends to demonstrate how, if you build up within the already built up areas, we might not have to, we will be more efficient with our transportation. And so I'm just wondering at what step in the RENA process, how that fits in, because it seems to perpetuate that we're going to have, there's X amount of need in the unincorporated area in this valley and that valley and so forth. And so they get their allocation in unincorporated, where I'm thinking, I wish the allocations would be more into the cities and build the cities up instead of continuing to have the unincorporated areas.
Yeah, I
have
will
to
say
absorb the
this is the
development.
first cycle that the county has split north and south for unincorporated and respected those numbers, which is good. So it's, you have,
60%. So remember, the first step of the RENA process went 60% to the south.
Yeah. But I'm not even thinking north and south. I'm just thinking, there's pressure on the county in Goleta Valley or in the whole South Coast. And so it's leading to identifying areas that are ag land, some of it prime ag land. Whereas if there was a bigger allocation in Goleta itself, and then they need to figure out how to build up, and there's a lot of ways that they could, and the same thing applies, I think, in other parts of the region. So it might be a bigger question, certainly, than we're going to solve sitting here now when I got 2 more short agenda items. But
yeah, I think I would just, let me say one thing. I view our sustainable community strategy in the most abbreviated format possible is we try and turn 30, 40 mile long commutes into 5 mile long commutes. And then we offer alternative transportation options for the shorter ones, while also continuing to provide options for the long distance through commuter bus and rail. But if we're going to meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets, it comes from turning 40 mile or 50 mile long commutes into 5 mile commutes or less. And so, and then with RENA, we give, say, the city of Santa Maria gets its allocation that the SBCAG board approves, HCD signs off on. We don't have any control whatsoever of what they do with that allocation.
I understand.
But they still have to demonstrate to the state how they're achieving the objectives.
Yeah.
And so my last question is about it's maybe sort of that first step in your process where you work with the cities and the county and come up with a methodology with the numbers. Is there a public step in that? Did you have some kind of workshops or?
Yes. Yes, we did. I think that was probably our most well-attended. It was during the pandemic. I remember we did virtual workshops. And then it's also discussed at probably 15 or 20 public meetings throughout the process too, the public or Brown Act meetings. But the we definitely had workshops for it.
And I just missed them. I didn't pay enough attention. I'm bringing stuff up now.
Yeah, that's the
I should have been
interesting.
there then and brought it up then. Maybe it would
People
have.
don't pay attention until it's in the housing element process.
That's, yeah, I would.
So I'll be there next time. I'll be 80 years old and I'll be there.
Okay, I
I'm
look
still
forward
here.
to.
Okay, thank you so much. Has anybody else got a Luanda or Joyce? Any other question on this? And thank you very much, Mike and Lauren.
Yeah, and I encourage you, like I said, when our advisory committees are docketed for their November meetings, you'll have access to the full draft travel trends. I've just scratched the surface on what's in there, so dig through it. And if you see something wrong, feel free to send me an email or give me a call.
All right, thank you so much.
And then SBCAG is in the process of transitioning to a new website. So it's a little bit difficult if you just search for our meetings right now until the end of November, probably. So this is a direct link to our meetings webpage. So you can get access to all the various meetings or sign up for meeting notifications as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Very
Good
good.
seeing you again.
Yeah, really
Right.
appreciate your time.
And so you're welcome to stay or to go as you wish. And the next item is the Santa Maria General Plan. Everybody in the meeting, well, Cliff and Joyce knows a lot about it, and Pam and Cliff have signed the letter that we submitted to the Planning Commission. And so I don't want to go through all what's in it, and if there were a bunch of people here that weren't up to speed on it, I'd want to talk about it and would have saved more time for it. But I'm sure you both know that, all three of you know that the city council put it off. It's not next week, it's November 7th is what's targeted. And so I've this afternoon I talked to Carlos Escobedo and we're going to meet, and he couldn't find the letter that we all signed, and so I sent it to him, and I also sent him the Appendix A that CEC put together that makes it really easy to zero in on the staff and consultant analysis that supports our case. And what I told Carlos, and we'll tell him in more detail with these things in front of us, that if you read the analysis, it doesn't argue at all for what's recommended by the Planning Commission. I want to leave time for Jeannie to present about the Watershed project, but you got any questions? Hey, Joyce, you got your thumb out. You want to say
Hi,
something?
yeah.
Good.
Could you send me the letter that everybody signed?
Yeah, I will in the appendix. Yeah,
Great, thank you.
will do. All right, thanks, Joyce. Thanks for joining us. So is that okay if we just leave it there on the general plan? Jeannie, it's all yours.
Okay, I had to unmute. Okay, I'm just going to make it brief. I think everybody here probably knows about the water project. We're working on Santa Maria River Healthy Watershed Initiative, and Pam told me she was going to try to make our training. I hope that's still the case.
So far.
Are we going to
Yes.
see you too, Cliff? Oh, darn. Okay, well, that's the way it is. But we have a training coming up on Monday. I have a few pictures. Have I shown you guys some of these watershed pictures? Yeah,
Sure.
I probably don't.
Have
Well,
you
I
seen the ones that Jeannie took recently with her drone showing the steam shovels and everything out in the riverbed?
That's an amazing shot. Yeah.
You did see that?
Mhm.
Okay.
So I don't need to repeat that unless Joyce wants to. I don't know. Maybe Joyce wants to see a couple of them. I could just do.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just do this really quickly.
I mean, they're dramatic, and we have 10 minutes if we want to use it. So
Okay, I'm just gonna do a real quick run through here. Let's see, share my screen. Okay, so this is the estuary, August of last year, when you could still get out to it, and it just amazed me that there were thousands of pelicans there. So this is where we wanted to do our water quality testing. And we thought we'd be able to. Here's the January rains, and only part of the road was wiped out at that time. It was over here and down there someplace. The entrance hadn't been wiped out yet, so we thought we'd be able to go. But at the same time, the estuary, the sandbar the water had broken through the sandbar. It gave an opportunity for fish to swim upstream, but nobody knows if any did, because there's no testing for that. But that would be something maybe we could test sometime. And then I just threw in a few shots of what all these storms created. Here's Guadalupe, part of Guadalupe Lake with the sugar factory back here. It just looks really beautiful. You could think in the old days how that would have been. But you can see how the farming equipment is here. This is where they farm, and they're farming again. But for a while, their land was inundated. And sorry, I didn't get these sorted the way I wanted to, but this is a Twitchell Dam with water in it, really beautiful. The dam's way over here. Little tiny spillway there, you can't really see it, but nice to see water there. This is Alamo Creek leading into the reservoir, and around the corner that way, that's the dam from that other picture. So here's another view of Guadalupe Lake with the sugar factory over here somewhere. And it's trying to reestablish itself. So over here was that other, what I just showed you, but now we're looking downstream. And so it's got this big V shape going on. And this is where they're farming most of the time. This is where Laguna Sanitation has its holding ponds, and then they sprinkle the extra water here, grows grass, and the farmer ranches, gets to put his, he puts his cattle out there and they get to eat. So this is what happened from the March rains and releases from Twitchell Dam. Wiped out, there's the entrance to the Guadalupe Preserve Park. And the road goes this way, and you can see it got wiped out over here. And then it goes back here, and it got wiped out somewhere down here as well. So they, this is just different views of that. And while all of this washed away, right next to the Guadalupe property, you can see the plastic pipes that the farmers use to drain their fields. And so for years I'd been hearing about these, but I hadn't seen them. So here's some examples of what happens underneath the fields where the water would want to stay if it had a choice, but it gets drained off. And now here they've rebuilt the road. It's down lower than it had been. They put some, and this is the entrance to the Guadalupe Beach Preserve. So they put some culverts in here. They've told us it won't withstand a really high flow, but it will withstand a low flow. And when they repair the other sections of the road, they'll open it up again. They expect that sometime next year, but couldn't get a really definite time. This is an aerial picture, the same thing. You can see how the river has cut across here, but now they've reclaimed, this area was all flooded. They've reclaimed that, and this is where those pipes were that I was showing you that got exposed, the plastic pipes. Here's where they're doing some work in the river to shore up, to create a berm so that it won't inundate the opening to Guadalupe Beach. And they're working, this is looking downstream with the estuary down here. They're also doing work upstream from this that I don't have pictures of. And this is a recent picture of now the sandbar has come back. I showed you earlier where it had broken through, but now it's come back, and so it's filling back up again. This is back in, I don't know, January or March, when the river was flowing pretty heavily, and it's still flowing because Twitchell Dam is releasing water, but I'm not sure at what pace. A couple of weeks ago, it was still a pretty good pace. And we went out and did water quality testing, and here's our guy from Creeklands. This is Tim. He's the one teaching us how to do it. You can walk all the way across the river and never go higher than your knees. He really didn't have to have all that gear on, but he did. And we did some testing just from the side of the river. This is our new employee, Nancy Avos. She's really wonderful. And this is somebody from Hancock who had worked for the Dune Center and heard about us from the Dune Center. She came out to do the testing. And that's that. That's my presentation, except to urge participation in our water group and either to help with the water quality testing or just join in discussions and help us get to build up a group of people who will be available and we can, advocate and educate on issues as they come up.
Thank you, Jeannie. This is the time on our agenda for any updates that anybody has. Joyce.
I got nothing.
Yeah, I just heard your microphone click. Glad to have you join us. And
Nice to be back.
yeah.
Good to have you back.
Yes.
All right.
I do have a question,
Please.
since Jeannie knows what this is. So all of a sudden, if I was reading the Santa Maria Times, the Santa Barbara County Legislative Program Committee, which I'd never heard of, but thanks to Jeannie, I know has been around for 30 years. But Jeannie, could you just briefly say how they fit into all of this alphabet soup of SBCAG and LAFCO and city and county? And...
Well, it's interesting because they started that when I used to work for the county, and they say, so much of what happens in the state affects the county. So they needed to have lobbyists or people going up to the state to say, this is what we want. As a county, these are things we need. And so they started that committee. And actually, because I got away from this after I left the county and I wasn't paying attention, I kind of forgot about this stuff, but I got on a mailing list and then they sent this to us. I skimmed it. Ken looked it over in more detail. And I think it's, they're probably asking for a lot of what we would approve of, but mainly it's to try to get their share of the action or to get things to policies that they believe in, which I think we pretty much tend to believe in. And Ken, you might you looked at it more than I did.
Is the legislative committee, Jeannie, like 3 members of the Board of Soups, or is it something else?
I don't think it's, I don't know. I forget now because I haven't looked at it.
It's Joan Hartman, Das Williams. Sarah looked into it, but I don't know who the other member is.
Yeah,
So
I think
there's 3 members.
there'd probably only be 2 of them because then otherwise it'd be a Brown Act thing.
Right.
So that would make sense. 2 supervisors.
So I did read a lot of it and skimmed most of it, but I read some that were things that we work on, and I couldn't come up with anything where I want to go down there and run my mouth and tell them they shouldn't do this or should do that.